Welcome back, Porch League, to the surprise continuation of the Don't Sleep on These series. Yeah, so we've previously gone over the tier ones and the tier twos that our league has never drafted. Luckily, most of those Pokemon have been drafted now. There are only two more drafts that we're going to have before Generation 7 ends and Generation 8 begins. And because we don't know what the Pokedex is like, this could be some of the last times that you draft any of those. So go back, look at the video that we did, and look at inside the server to see the Pokemon that have not yet been drafted out of the tier ones and tier twos. There's still two megas that have never been drafted. But this video, we're going to go over the tier threes that have never been drafted in our league. Some of these Pokemon maybe were picked up after the draft and free agency, but literally have never been drafted in our league. We're also going to do a follow up video on tier fours later in the week. But without further ado, why don't my co hosts introduce themselves?
Well, you all know me. I'm Coach Adam Schmidt, Black J32 of the Punxsutawney Pastoritsu. I'm excited to do it. Don't sleep on these. And we have another guest.
Yeah, Jay-Z said it best. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Hove. O-H to the O-V. I'm going to stop, but that's mostly only because my name's not Hove, it's Ian. You know me as the Bruddamaster and coach of the Houston Haxorus.
And I think this is your first time on any series that I've done on my personal YouTube channel. Definitely the first time on this new channel. So it's a little bit of a lie that you're reintroducing yourself, but
Right, yeah, I know. But it's like real talk, I have this problem where someone says a phrase that it's at all like a lyric that I like. And I love that lyric, so every time someone says introduce, it comes barreling into my brain. So had to do it.
You just
Incredible.
get your eyes turn completely white and you just be possessed by the song lyric.
Real talk, my first D&D character was exactly that. He got quote unquote possessed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's so
It was
funny.
very funny.
All right, so basically one of the things that we did is instead of simply going through the tier threes and like listing them off in alphabetical order, which is how the list populated, we just thought about which ones did what, and categorized them that way. The first three that we're going to talk about are more just miscellaneous. They didn't fit equally into any of the categories. Maybe we'll call them utility Pokemon and defensive Pokemon. After that, we're going to talk about the weather Pokemon that are in the tier. We're going to talk about, and then finally, we're going to talk about the offensive Pokemon. If you notice the list, there's 4 offensive fighting type wall breakers that our league has never drafted yet. So I kind of parsed those off to the end to maybe so we can discuss why you would draft one over the other, or what each of them do, because there have been some other fighting types that get drafted all the time in the tier. I think these ones are still worth talking about. So,
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising to me, and maybe shows a little bit of a blind spot in our league with how similar some of these types of Pokemon are. Because even though, we have those fighting type wall breakers at the end, but you could even lump some of these other Pokemon in with that too, like Gardevoir or Honchkrow. But we're separating it out this way. But it's just a little bit interesting, including, we have this weather kind of category as well. It's
yeah. All right. So, the first set, the miscellaneous set, Adam's going to kind of talk about each of these Pokemon. You're familiar with some of them. If you're watching this video and you're not in the Porch League, we had a Mega clause where if the Mega was drafted, then you can't draft the non-Mega and vice versa. So Gardevoir's on this list. We've seen the Mega Gardevoir in the league a handful of times. So that's just a little disclaimer. Adam, why don't you talk about each of these 3 tier 3s that are worth drafting, that we shouldn't sleep on?
Yeah, so first we have Donphan. Solid attack, solid defense. With Sturdy, Sturdy is great because you can run some of those 25% berries. Cussed Up is pretty exceptional. It gets some fun utility like Knock Off and Ice Shard. But what's best is, in my opinion at least, is it gets Rapid Spin and Stealth Rocks. So it's Rapid Spin, Stealth Rocker with Sturdy. It's a nice dedicated lead, but also kind of fun to clean up if you bring Custat Berry. So it kind of has that strange utility. Mono Ground is kind of a nice defensive typing. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we've seen it. I've had it before in the league, and it worked out really well for me. I also had like 3 other ground Pokemon on the team, and I still found reason to use Donphan. That defensive typing, even the 90 HP helps the Spadef of 60 pretty well. So you're able to live a lot of things and don't even need to rely on the sturdy ability, even though it's nice that it's there. And having a Stealth Rocker with priority and with the ability to use Custap, yeah, you only get. We don't know if Custap's going to be in the next gen, and it was just released pretty recently in Gen 7. So any sturdy Pokemon you should consider picking up in the next two drafts that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so next up we have Gardevoir. Gardevoir is pretty interesting. Like Kyle was saying, we've had Mega Gardevoir a lot. Psychic Fairy is a great typing. It's actually pretty specially defensive and pretty specially offensive.
Right.
115 Spadef, 125 special attack. So you might think the best option is to just put a Specs on it or a Scarf on it, which can definitely do well. But it has some weird tech, which is kind of nice. So it has things like Trace. So you can trace something like a Beast Boost. You can Scarf, trace a Beast Boost, which is great. It gets things like Will-O-Wisp, things like Trick, things like Healing Wish. So Scarf, Healing Wish, fun set. Yeah, and it just has some really nice coverage too. Dazzling Gleam. It gets like Draining Kiss, which you might not expect of it. It gets Energy Ball. It gets, I believe, Shadow Ball as well.
Right.
Things like Icy Wind to lower speed. It's kind of a mean look Memento. So it has kind of these weird, I don't know, just has some strange tech that you might not expect on it. It gets Wish as well, which, you would think to put Wish on a Pokemon like this, but right. It can work for sure.
Yeah, it's a decent, I mean, it's once you start getting to the lower tier fairies, they start losing some of their fairy qualities, or they're like limited to only some of their fairy qualities. And I think Gardevoir is one of the lowest lowest tiered fairy types that still keeps a lot of what makes fairies good. It has such a good cleric role. It gets Wish and Healing Wish, and it gets a lot of those status moves like Will-O-Wisp. It gets Trick Room, and like you said, I'll just highlight something that Gardevoir gets that, or can use, that Mega Gardevoir can't, is Trick, which can be pretty helpful on a team. And yeah, base 125 special attack with Calm Mind. It's a good Pokemon. And it can almost, I don't want to say it can run Trick Room better than its Mega, but its speed is lower. So
I was going to say, that would be the reason to I would just straight up say it. Yeah, it's a more obvious Trick Room user.
Yeah.
Especially on paper.
Something else that I'll point out, like we mentioned earlier, we have all of these fighting wall breaker Pokemon that are fighting types, which is actually a pretty common role for Gardevoir. Actually, quad resists fighting, and has like super effective stab against it. So it's really nice. So even though it has 68 HP and 65 defense, it can kind of pivot in on these Pokemon. You might have like a Scarf Metacham or something like that.
Right.
And it's just kind of a nice pivot.
And we've seen with Pokemon with, I don't want to call it mediocre HP and defense, but things like Clefable doesn't have the best stats, but you can just run it bold natured, and its special attack and special defense are already good enough, and offensive fairy psychic typing is already good enough that like you can run max HP, max defense, and it's still a very bulky Pokemon. Even if you just look at its stats and you don't think it looks that way.
Yeah, so the last of these kind of miscellaneous Pokemon we're going to talk about is Porygon 2. Porygon 2 is kind of weird. We have Porygon Z in the same tier as Porygon 2, and so there might be some question of like, why would I draft Porygon 2 over Porygon Z? What makes it different? And the answer is that Porygon Z is much more offensive. Porygon 2 is much much more deep. So it still keeps analytic, which Porygon Z has. I can't remember if they don't quite have the same abilities. Porygon 2 has trace, just like Gardevoir, which I mentioned earlier, which you can come in and trace things like Regenerator on like your Tangulas or your Toxapexes, things like that. Check out the stat line: 85 HP, 90 defense, 90 special defense. Normal typing, which is pretty good defensive typing. It's only weak to, and it gets recover. And on top of that, it's not the final evolution, so you can run Eviolite on it.
Right.
So this is really nasty. So you can run like a recover Toxic set, a recover Thunder Wave. It gets foul play. Like I said, you can trace cool abilities like Regenerator, for example, or like a Natural Cure.
Yep.
Oh wow, yeah, that'd be. And you could trace Regenerator, switch out, and then like come in on and trace Beast Boost or something, and then polish something off, and then make use of what is still a pretty good special attack stat too.
Right. And this Pokemon's nasty. Yeah, you can run agility sets on it if you want to be offensive. I believe it gets nasty plot as well.
Right.
Yeah, let me just check that. Looks like it does not get nasty plot, but
So it gets
you can
download if you were interested in doing something offensive.
Yep.
Right.
And it can run without Z's or anything. It can still run conversion and like run Shadow Ball. So you can have this defensive Pokemon. The opponent might even cover for knowing, obviously your opponent knows you have Porygon, so they might run some physical wall breaker, and if you can expect the switch, you can just run conversion with Shadow Ball, get to a ghost type, and then recover Toxic or do whatever walls do.
Yeah. It's also worthwhile to note it gets some utility moves like Trick and Trick Room as well, which are it's nice to have that option on your team, even if that's not the Pokemon that you really want to run it on.
Right. So yeah, these are our three miscellaneous. They're three good Pokemon. They all fit. Honestly, they all fit most teams. Obviously, you want to be careful that your defensive Pokemon synergize with your offensive Pokemon. So if your offensive Pokemon are weak to fighting, maybe don't draft Porygon 2. And the same can be said about the other two. Just make sure that like they fit with your core. But they're great Pokemon, and I don't think you should continue to sleep on them.
Yep. So Coach Ian, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the weather Pokemon in Tier 3 that have not been drafted yet?
I'd love to. If you guys know me, you know I love a good weather gimmick. And part of that comes from my background. When I first started playing, it was Gen 3, and honestly, about the same time I got Leaf Green, I got Pokemon Coliseum, which is all doubles, and which really relies on weather and a lot more specific mechanics. Some of the more now obscure mechanics to really do well in that game. So, yeah, love me a good weather team. I'm going to start by talking about Gigalith. Who is one of, I think, the best newer weather users because of its stat line and the way that Sandstorm influences its special defense. So, just defensively, we're talking 85 HP, 130 defense, and 80 special defense, which if you're running Sandstream on Gigalith, goes up to, it's multiplied by 1.5, so it's essentially 120 special defense. That's just crazy. I went ahead and pulled up a quick calc. If you have a modest full special attack Lucario and you use a Z on Aurasphere, Gigalith still lives 100% of the time, and then it's probably going to KO you with Earthquake in exchange. So,
oh my gosh.
There are other things too where I'm sure you pull it up and you're like, just insane things that Gigalith manages to live that you didn't think it would. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, it gets two other great abilities. You can run Sturdy to guarantee a live and then a retaliation. Because here's the other thing I should mention about Gigalith. It's got 135 base attack. So in addition to probably living anything you throw at it, it's going to retaliate with something that no one wants to. I mean, you'd have to be like Stack Attacka or something to want to come in on this thing.
Right.
In addition to that, it gets Stealth Rocks. It gets access to Toxic if you want to do something more along those lines. You can run Custap Explosion, sort of it's on its last legs, clearly, and you still go out with a crazy amount of damage. It gets Iron Head for coverage, Earthquake for coverage. It is an absolute monster, mostly defensively, but don't sleep on its offensive capabilities either.
Right, and I actually think so. We've had sand teams before. I actually think recently I've come around to the idea that Gigalith is the best sand setter for Draft League. Obviously, on ladder and stuff, Hippowdon has use, but in our league, it costs a lot. So, and it's pretty passive. So, I don't think it's necessarily good for a hyper offensive sand team in Draft League. I think something can also be said against Tyranitar as well, because when it's drafted as the sand setter, you can't run all the diversity and variety that Tyranitar has intrinsic to it. You're forced to run. You could run it with the whatever, is it light clay? What's the one that helps with
Smooth rock.
Smooth rock? Yeah, you can run it with
Yeah.
smooth rock or stuff like that instead of all the other things that Tyranitar is good for. Gigalith is a great one simply because you can run it with smooth rock and explosion, and you get it in on one turn, you explode the same turn that you're setting sand, and then now you still have 6 turns left of sand. You can go to Excadrill or what other sand abusers you drafted.
Right. On that note, one quick specific strategy I want to mention. Both Gigalith and Hippowdon get Sand Stream and Sand Force. So you could draft them both, and then your opponent never knows who's going to be the one dealing all the damage and who's going to be the one doing the setting.
That's true.
So, yeah,
That
just
is
an
a
option.
great combination.
Great options there. Gigalith is a great sand setter. Let's talk about one of your options for Drought if you want to have a Sunsetter, and that is Ninetales. Ninetales has great speed at on base 100, 81 special attack, and then its stab fire moves are obviously going to continue to be boosted in the sun. It's got 100 special defense, so especially it's going to live like a water attack in the sun because that will have been weakened. You might be able to live like an earth power or something. You can set up with Nasty Plot. It's a good Z user. Solar Beam obviously is going to allow it great coverage. Specs with it. All sorts of great options like that. And another thing I want to mention is kind of like with Gigalith, you don't have to run. You can draft Ninetales and not even use the sun at all, or only use the sun 1 week, because Flash Fire is still a great ability. If you're drafting Celesteela and you also picked up, or rather, like you picked up like Kartana and a bunch of other Pokemon that are weak to fire, Ninetales just provides you a great switch in for all those options. So, and ups its fire attack more. So, yeah, Ninetales is beefy, offensively threatening, and gives you a good immunity.
There you go.
It's amazing.
So the last of the weathers and the tier 3 setters that we haven't drafted.
Yep, is Politoed.
And clearly
what?
Clearly the worst.
Okay.
It's so bad.
Poor Politoed is not the best Pokemon, but Drizzle is a good ability, and you can't deny that. And the other thing too, like let's be a little kinder to Politoed. It less of an electric weakness than Pelipper. So if your team's already got a crazy electric weakness, maybe this makes more sense for you to take it.
Right. Part of the reason why something like a weather team in OU works is because not all teams are prepped for it. If you know you're going up against weather, you can just like stack it with all sorts of electric offense. And so Politoed, at least with its special defense and its HP, I don't know what it's going to do in return to those Pokemon, but at least it's not Pelipper in that way.
Right, and
That's
a couple
true.
other things in its example. It's another case of an ability where you can run Absorb on it instead, and you've got an immunity and you've got an acceptable switch in. It does have the bulk, and I think it recover, or did I make that up? Do I want it to have recover and it actually doesn't? Yeah, that's what I wanted, not what it has.
It gets a common set used to be Chesto Berry and Resto Chesto.
So options there. And then the other thing too, a Scald or a Hydro Pump in Rain, it's still got base 90 special attack. So a Scald or a Hydro Pump is still going to do a pretty significant amount of damage, even if it's not as much as the other things that you're going to take to abuse the Rain team that you're drafting, such as Kingdra, our last tier 3 weather-based Pokemon. Obviously, it's got Swift Swim, which is the main reason that you're going to take it on a team like this. And worth remembering as well, because of its Water Dragon typing. Like, I guess an issue that I had a lot, especially like my first season, is, I don't want to draft too many Pokemon that have overlapping typings. But with Kingdra's Water Dragon typing, it's neutral to both Electric and Grass. So whether you're taking Politoed or Pelipper, it's an acceptable switch in for both of those.
Right.
Which is what you're doing anyway, because you want to get it on the field as fast as possible to take advantage of Swift Swim. This is then combined with, Water Dragon's pretty good offensive typing. It's got 95 attack and special attack, so if you really want to do one over the other, you can. But obviously, you're mostly going to be doing, Draco Meteor, Dragon Pulse,
Hydro Pump.
that other one. Hydro Pump was exactly what I was looking for. It gets Signal Beam for coverage. It's got a few other options. Kingdra is a good, fast, especially offensive Pokemon in the rain. So
Right, and in Draft League, you obviously have to bring some diversity, so you're not just counter built every time. So you can run it with Sniper, increase your critical hits. Was it Scope Lens? What's the?
Yep.
Yeah,
Or
so you
Razor
can.
Claw.
Yeah. So you can run like a crit Kingdra if you wanted with agility, or what's the move? What's the status move that helps with focus energy?
Focus energy.
Yeah, so you could run focus
Yeah.
energy. You can there's some ways to increase your crit chance to with three different ones. Critical hit damage. Okay, yeah, this one doesn't increase critical hits, but it does. But like if you're running focus energy scope lens, that's really helping out your crit chances. And so you can just spam Draco Meteor. And like sure it could be nerfing your special attack, but if you're critting every time it doesn't matter. So
And if you want
That's
to crit
true.
every time, it gets a move called Laser Focus. Until the end of the next turn, the user's attacks will be critical hits.
oh yeah.
So you send Kingdra out against Hippowdon, something that doesn't want to be up in front of it. Use Laser Focus that turn, and the next turn someone is getting hit with a Sniper guaranteed crit. So
Wow. Does anyone with Skill Link get that?
Laser Focus.
Let's find out
yeah.
live. Skill Link. Laser Focus.
Yeah, Ambipom.
Ambipom
actually.
and Cincino? How do you say that?
Oh, that's
Chinchino is
fine.
how I say it.
Okay. Well, both
Somebody
of them will be
run
talked
that.
about in the next video because
Yeah, in that tier 4 video, we're gonna have to remember to bring that up.
So awesome. Those are our weather Pokemon. You guys know weather.
Use it.
Yeah.
Use weather. It's great.
Yeah.
The rest of this video will be talking about the tier 3 offensive Pokemon left in the tier that have never been drafted. Sharpedo is one where we have seen the Mega before, but we have not seen the non-Mega drafted. So, Adam, tell us why someone might just want the tier 3 Sharpedo.
Tier 3 Sharpedo. So Mega Sharpedo is great. We all know like the classic set with Protect to get your speed boost before you Mega Evolve. But regular Sharpedo can run the exact same set. Protect, it has a little bit lower attack than Mega Sharpedo. It has a little bit lower, or it doesn't get Strong Jaw because it has speed boost. But it still has the exact same move. So you get moves like Crunch, moves like Ice Fang, Psychic like Waterfall.
Liquidation.
And Liquidation. And I'm thinking especially something that would be really nice is to run a banded set. And think about the number of Pokemon that are quad weak to ice. Pokemon like Landorus T, Pokemon like Gliscor, like Zygarde, like Garchomp. There's a lot of them. And so you can run, and I just did some quick banded, things like Salamence, Pokemon that are trying to Dragon Dance up. With your speed boost, you can, force some switch. You can hit hard back with like an Ice Fang, for example. This is and this is like a classic cleaner because once you get going, no one's outspeeding, and unless you have like a muck punch or a vacuum wave user on the opponent's team, that might be it.
Right.
Yeah, or you need to have brought haze, and you need to have something that can still live a hit from Sharpedo.
Right, so. But even something like Toxapex, let me run the calc on Psychic Fangs, but yeah, even Toxapex is taking more than half from a banded Psychic Fang.
Yeah.
So
Sharpedo's good. One of the things, you'll play it differently than you play Mega Sharpedo. Mega Sharpedo probably can break a little bit easier because of Strong Jaw. But I mean, I would say it's less likely that you'll run Protect on it. Because it's less likely that you'll bring it in those situations. So you're opening up that fourth slot to more of the tech moves that you like in Draft League. You could run Destiny Bond if you wanted. It just has some cool options: Poison Jab, Psychic Fangs, Earthquake, and I think someone should draft it.
Yeah. The next Pokemon we'll talk about, another offensive dark type, and this is one that has been on my radar for a long time, and I've really wanted to draft. It's Honchkrow. Dark Flying, base 71 speed is the reason I think that people haven't picked this one up before. Right. But it's 125 attack and 105 special attack, actually, I'm noticing. It gets moves like Calm Mind. So I don't know, its special move pool isn't maybe so great. But it gets Psychic. It gets Shadow Ball.
Yeah.
It gets
you might bring it once, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. But the real reason is Life Orb Sucker Punch. That's the real reason you drop. And also Brave Bird. So this is just a nasty wall breaker. It also has Moxie, which is really fun.
God, I love Moxie.
So good. Yeah, you come in, you Sucker Punch something, you Moxie up, and your Brave Bird is just destroying everything.
Right.
It also gets attack like Taunt. At 71 speed, you're faster than all the base 60s probably. Depending on EVs. So
right.
You're able to taunt, and then you can either set up or you don't have to worry about Sucker Punching. You can kind of Brave Bird freely. It's really, really nasty. So I would highly recommend drafting Hunt.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's weird things you can do with it as well. I was just looking. I saw it gets Perish Song. You could run Mean Look Perish Song.
Ugh, yeah, you definitely could.
It's a weird set. I mean, it's definitely like more Draft League viable than something you'd see on the ladder, but just a weird Pokemon, very unique. And you'll win some games because of it if you draft it.
Yep. It also gets Tailwind, so if you're worried about that speed, you can run Tailwind.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it sucks that it doesn't get Knockoff.
That's true.
Would be a little...
Does it not? Wow. Yeah, that's probably the only reason it's not higher up, though.
Right, because usually you'd get the Dark type for Knockoff, but it's still a good Pokemon. Yeah, I've seen it used pretty well in other leagues. So consider drafting Honchkrow.
All right. Now, Kyle, why didn't you finish us off with these physical fighting breakers that have somehow remained undrafted in our league?
Right. Well, once again, Mega Heracross has been drafted, and Mega Medicham has obviously been drafted. So there's some reason why, due to like a forced scarcity, two of these haven't been drafted. But I think just some of these are like fit the definition of this series. I think Toxicroak and Emboar are slept on. We've even talked about lowering Emboar to tier 4, which I think is a mistake. I think let me just show you right now. So you have fighting type wall breakers. What can be switch-ins to that? You can have flying types that can switch into fighting type wall breakers, and you can have bulky water types. Also bulky psychic types. Those three things.
Ghosts because of immunity, but
right. Emboar. Okay, so fighting Pokemon that get knockoff is like a shorter list, especially when you get to the lower tiers. It's still pretty common, but like to also have Sorry, I'm going too fast. The big thing I'm noticing is fighting Pokemon with electric coverage. So what is it? Wild Charge?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wild Charge fighting Pokemon. Look, Embor's the only one. So
Yeah.
to have a wall breaker with firefighting coverage that with Reckless to run Flare Blitz, what's it? Double Edge? What's it get? What's it? Body?
Double Edge is
I don't think
definitely would qualify under Reckless. I don't know if Emborg.
I don't think it gets it.
It does not.
Whoops. But like thinking of Head Smash, Flare Blitz, Wild Charge, you could run Return on it. It just has an amazing attack stat with Reckless, and its base speed is going to make you faster than a lot of the walls. So it's doing its job as a wall breaker, and it's doing it really well. I'll just throw up some calcs on the side just to show you how much damage it's doing to some classic walls in the tier. Here's a bulky water type calc, and see how much it's doing. And then here's one against like a bulky psychic like Cresselia that might want to come in on it. So
Yeah, and let's also not forget how powerful a move Head Smash is.
right,
That's base 150 power. Combine that with Reckless. Combine that with Embor's base 123 attack, and it's more useful than a move like Giga Impact, which has the same power. But Rock is better offensive typing, and you can continue to. You probably can't actually. You can probably do Head Smash twice and then you're dead. But
Right.
it's still you don't have to wait a turn to do it again.
right. And
There's not a turn where your opponent takes advantage of you.
with base 100 special attack, they might switch in their special wall or something. I can think of someone thinking Swampert or Seismitoad can, or Quagsire can come in and do well against this, but it has decent enough special coverage with moves like Grass Knot, that
Focus Blast, Flamethrower.
yeah, exactly, that it can do something on the special side if you need it to.
It also gets Scald,
What?
That's
which
dumb.
is I don't like it, but somehow it gets Scald.
Oh my god. I hate when fire types get Scald. That's the dumbest. I mean, it makes sense, but it's also dumb.
So Emborg, don't sleep on it. Honestly, if I'm like I will be upfront. It is on my short list. There's only a few fighting types that I want to use in the next few drafts. Emborg being one of them. Yeah, Metacham is the next one on this list. Like I said, it is often not taken just because the Mega has been taken. But now that we don't have that clause anymore, you should consider drafting Metacham with Life Orb, and its ability, Pure Power. It's the same as Huge Power. So it's what is Diggersby? Diggersby has a base attack of 56, and Metacham has a base attack of 60. So it's hitting roughly the same as Diggersby is, with things like Fake Out, Bullet Punch for priority. You can run Life Orb on it. You can run, honestly, sometimes you can run Choice Band, 3 attacks, and then have your fourth attack be Baton Pass. So you can pivot into the whatever their switch in is going to be for Metacham. You can whittle that down so that Metacham can no longer have a switch in later. Yeah, and just an interesting calc is that a choice band Metacham is hitting harder than a Mega Metacham. So if you want
That's
if you want the
ridiculous.
breaking power, fighting Psychic as a wall breaker is awesome. So consider, and it gets the elemental punches. It can stay in on Pokemon like Gliscor or something like that, and it has the coverage for it. So don't sleep on Metacham. I'll skip Toxicroak to talk about Heracross real quick, and just say Heracross, its best ability is Guts, even though it also gets Moxie. And running this Guts set with the Flame Orb and a base 125, it is hitting everything for stupid damage. Its base speed of 85, you can scarf it, and it's faster than a lot of the premier top Pokemon, and those Pokemon are also weak to its stab oftentimes. A Scarf Heracross can run Adamant, outspeed Megalodios, and OHKO it with Megahorn. It's stupid. This Pokemon hits.
That's ridiculous.
This Pokemon
Yeah,
hits
and
so hard. If you're not running it with Flame Orb, you're often probably running it Choice Scarf. And its move pool is good enough. You're going to use this different than Mega Heracross, which is good. You're going to use a lot of those like skill link abilities like Bullet Seed and stuff like that. This one's going to be more your classic like Facade, close combat, Mega Horn, and then its physical coverage moves are listed below. So you're going to get things like Earthquake, things like Stone Edge, Throat Chop. It's a good Pokemon.
yeah, and a reminder with any Guts, you don't have to run Flame Orb. If you position it carefully, if you see a Toxic or a Will-O-Wisp coming in, you just switch, and then you've got a Scarf plus Guts or whatever.
Right.
Whatever item you're bringing, it allows you to, if you let someone else do the poisoning for you, burning or whatever, you're freeing up that item slot for something else.
Right. I mean, you can also run.
Exactly.
There's also creative things that you can do in Draft League, like you can run Rock Tomb on it, predicting their switch into maybe the flying type that can take it out because of its typing. And you might be faster than it after one Rock Tomb. Rock Tombs, and maybe 2 Rock Tombs will kill it if your Guts Flame Orb. Or you can run some other coverage moves on it. So this is a lot more of like a wall breaker in the classic sense compared to its Mega, and isn't just a lesser version of its Mega, but has a very like a very niche spot in Draft League itself. So there's regular Heracross, and the last one I'll talk about is Toxicroak. Toxicroak gets Swords Dance and Nasty Plot. It's kind of like Lucario in that sense, and fighting poison coverage is offensively just as strong as fighting steel coverage. Your switch-ins to fighting types are going to be your fairy types. They're going to be, things that don't want to come and like, depending, if you can figure out accurately what your opponent's potential Toxicroak check is, you can just build this thing around it. Like, its special move pool is good enough with Dark Pulse, Shadow Ball, Sludge Wave, Focus Blast. You could run Z Belch if you want to nuke. You could run Z Focus Blast. It's just it's good on the special side, and on the physical side, it's also really good. So you have things like Gug Shot, and Focus Punch. If you run like a sub Focus Punch set, you could run.
Notably, it doesn't get close combat, but gets Cross Chop, which has a rate. So
Right. Yeah. Honestly, it would be tier 2 with Lucario if it got close combat. But things like Drain Punch actually help this thing live for quite a long time. It also gets Sucker Punch, which is nice. Gets knockoff.
Yeah.
It gets an astounding move pool.
and
one thing that's really.
Oh, there you go first, Adam.
I was going to say one thing that's nice physically is that dry skin means that, on the physical side, Toxicroak doesn't fear switching in on Scald Burn.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually healing from dry skin, and it's not going to be burned by Scald. So
Right.
That's.
And stacking immunities is always good in Draft League. So having a Pokemon like Toxicroak, which just gives you a water immunity, which isn't generally a real immunity, can really help some of your other Pokemon that are weak to water. If you have high tier Pokemon that are weak to water, Toxicroak is a good wall breaker potentially for those, depending on how the rest of the typings go.
Yeah, and just to finish up talking about its abilities some more, you can also, another thing I love about Dry Skin is Toxicroak is a surprisingly good choice for a rain team, because if you run Life Orb, you're doing the 9% damage to yourself every turn. getting 12% back from rain in dry skin.
Right.
And then anticipation lets you know packing something weird that's going to KO it.
Right.
And then poison touch lets you just get more poison out there. So
wow,
yeah,
this gets so
Toxic
many.
Croak's a great mon.
This gets
great,
so
great
many
abilities.
priority moves: bullet punch, sucker punch, and fake out.
Wow.
So
all of
that's
which
great.
could then poison your opponent before they've even moved.
That's
so
that's so true. So Toxic Croak is a decent wall breaker. Definitely has a spot inside tier 3. And you can make it work on your team, especially if it works well with your other higher tier offense. Which kind of leads me to, I guess we'll close with this. I'll link a video that I did a few weeks ago titled "How I Draft League," talking about what I think about when I draft. Goes through like a lot of the staples. Um, I tried to find another 101 video on Draft League that said everything that I've learned, and I couldn't really find one that did it, so I made my version of one. One of the things that I talked about in that was that every team should have a wall breaker, and the important thing about wall breakers is that they break down the walls that your sweepers have trouble with. So if you have a cleanup Pokemon like Mega Alakazam, you can intuit or kind of deduce what walls will stop it, like steel types or other bulky psychics, things like that. And so finding a wall breaker that breaks, it's important that you ask the question, like, not just what wall breakers are left, but what do I need a wall breaker to do, and then draft accordingly. If it is something like Mega Alakazam, which has trouble with steel types, has trouble with psychic, bulky psychic types, Mega Heracross is a great Pokemon to go with that. If it's something like a dark type that is trying to break or is trying to clean up on your team, then you want something that can deal with fairies. And so something like Toxicroak might be a better wall breaker for you. There's all sorts of reasons why these four and the other fighting type Pokemon, why you would pick one over the other, and they're not simply just interchangeable because they're all fighting type wall breakers. So, hopefully, that's something that will help you figure out why you want to pick one of these, but also just in general about drafting, so you don't sleep on other good Pokemon.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching our video about these tier 3s. Don't sleep on them.
Yep.
Next one up will be our tier 4s, and hopefully some of these Pokemon, if not all of them, are drafted in the next 2 drafts, because at least right now we don't know what the Pokedex is going to look like for Gen 8. So it would be cool if our league drafted every Pokemon. All right.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Peace.
All right. Bye.